Are good. Everything's good. Okay, everyone, welcome back to Business Without Borders. Sorry for our technical difficulties. I've got Neha now. No thanks to StreamYard today, but I do love StreamYard. It allows me to do this. So I would like to welcome, as I mentioned before, a beautiful and wonderful Ms. Neha from Delhi, India, today to talk about what's going on there and what it's like just to live and to work there. You want to focus on the good things too. So good morning or good evening, Neha. How are you?
I am very well. Thank you, Angie. Good evening and good morning to all the guests and you as well.
Thank you. And thanks for being here with me today. Neha and I have been in a group that we met because of the pandemic that pulled a lot of people together, a global group that we try to share business opportunities across countries and help each other get to know the right people in the right places. So she has an incredible background. One of the reasons I wanted to have her here is her broadcast background, and she works in public relations and branding, and really, really a wonderful person to talk to about the situation, understanding the news, and all these types of things. So, Neha, could you give just a brief introduction of yourself to everyone?
Sure. Thank you, Angie. First of all, I extend a lot of gratitude and thanks to you for having me on your show in Business Without Borders. And it is really exciting and very happy to have you in my network and to have you as a dear friend over the time that we know each other now. Well, I've been in the media industry and communications industry for almost 20 years. I've been a former journalist in India, covering different beats, and I've been working with corporate communications with national international development sector organizations. I worked with United Nations for one of the projects, a huge project on sanitation, where we were doing a lot of communication, advocacy, media stakeholders, workshops, and policy, working with the government at the center, at the state level, and at the local level as well, in 3 states, 20 districts of India. And now, well, I'm running a couple of businesses. One of them is a marketing and global brand communication company called Menacent Talk Communications, under which we provide a lot of advisory and consulting services to individuals on their personal profiling, to startups on their go to market strategy. We help them align their messages, narratives, what needs to be said, how it needs to be said, when, what, where, why, how. So we answer all those questions with our clients and we really help them to choose and make them popular among their set of clients. So that's what I do.
Well, thank you. So obviously, I think we know who to talk to if we're interested in working in India. She obviously knows exactly where to go and what to do. So, Neha, I think the first thing I'd like to talk about is the size of India, because as we mentioned, that seems to be one of the major struggles with containing the pandemic is the simple population that is going on. How do you happen to know? Well, I actually looked up the population. It says 1.36 billion people in India, which is the second largest in the world. So tell me what it's like to actually live. You live in a big city in India. What's it like to live there? How many people, how big are your homes? How big is the average place? What's it like?
Oh, very interesting question. Angie, never has anyone asked this question to me, but this is very interesting. you know, yes, definitely. I mean, given the population density of US vis-a-vis India, I think we are four times as the population of US. Uh, Even larger
Yeah.
than that, in fact, if I truly say. uh, Homes, I mean, we have all different kinds of homes. The good thing about India is, yes, the population density is large from north to west to east to south. However, up in the mountains when you go, so you find little less population because hilly area is a different area. The kind of, there are not very many industries, there are not so many jobs, so you find more nature, you find more vegetation. The kind of occupations in the hilly areas of India are very different. People survive more on occupations like animal husbandry, farming, a lot of those basic things. As you travel towards the plateau region, which is more towards the central part of India, which are the main the hinter heartland of India, I should say. So the belt states of Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Delhi, from where I am, Mumbai, Bangalore. So all these states are the capital states and plateau region, and a lot of industries, offices, companies, they're all here. And then you travel towards the eastern part of India again, which is the other corner, and we have beautiful, exceptionally good 7 awesome states there, which are very, very culturally rich. And again, the whole occupation, or in terms of the revenue source, or how people work, how people stay, what they eat, it is so different. It looks like a different country altogether. And then we travel towards west and the south of India, which is again a very, very different culture, very diverse. The west is more towards it is joining the ports. So we have uh, the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal, all these oceans. So we have different ports from where a lot of export happens, and a lot of different kinds of businesses happens. So these are the kind of diversities that we see in terms of staying being here in India. Uh, just to answer quickly your question, what kind of homes, etc., we have, I think we have all different kinds of homes, from big farmhouses to small 1 BHK rooms to studio apartments where individuals live, married couples live. There are a lot of places, rural places, where still there is culture of joint family. That means one family would have uh, 8 to 15 people in one family. But in the cities
Wow.
like where I am, the cosmopolitan cities, we are largely the individuals staying, or 1 or 2 people in the family, or just one couple staying with 1 or 2 kids. But in the rural areas, if you go, you still find big families, and the whole culture is so different there. So you see all this diversity, and the beautiful thing is you see this diversity the moment, like I'm sitting here at my in my home right now in Delhi. So the moment I travel hardly 50, 60 kilometers away from Delhi, approximately 30, 40 miles away from Delhi, and I start seeing all these, different things, different family setups, different foods, different waters, which is so motivating, and it is so refreshing for me as a city person, even when I go beyond city.
Yeah.
So that is very interesting, and it's a
And
pleasure for us.
it's so fun to see you so happy about that. You talk about how, and I think of how small for me as America, as you said, we're almost the opposite, right? We have such a small population, such a big place. And I sit here and think, gosh, I can't believe I don't have that extra bedroom. This really puts it in perspective. You've got these huge families living in small rooms, or I don't know. It's so interesting to think about. And that's one of the reasons I like to do this, talk to people, because it doesn't feel real sometimes. You see pictures across the world, think of families living together, but that's so far from my reality that I look at it and I think, oh, that would be awful. I can't imagine living with my brother and all his crazy kids still, right? But you're like, oh, it's so great, it's so beautiful, we can walk out the door and everyone's together. And I think that's great because it makes all of us think about things in a better way, a positive way. And that's also the main reason Neha and I talked about doing this, because India has had such negative news in the spotlight right now due to the COVID cases. And we wanted to also talk about how beautiful and diverse this country is. Something else that I thought was really fascinating, because obviously language, but you have no national language. There's a lot of languages spoken, but India doesn't technically have a national language. So what would you say is the main language that you see spoken in India?
No, definitely. We do have a national language. The only difference is from north to south, the national language acceptance is more towards Hindi, which is more popular as a mother tongue in the northern belts of India. And as we move down south, there are just 1 or 2 states. They consider English as their first language, or their own regional language as their language. However, definitely Hindi and English, they both continue to be the national language. And largely, you will find people, especially in the cities or in the urban or suburban areas, speaking, I would say, reasonably well English. They would be reasonably good. Yeah, maybe in the rural areas, people are more comfortable either in their regional languages or Hindi. But otherwise, the larger chunk of population in the cities definitely is very well versed with English as a first language.
Which makes sense because I mean, I've never met someone from India that didn't have perfect English. I think the one thing that Americans struggle with is that the tempo of the rhythm of the language because it's very fast for us. It's very sing-songy for us, which is funny because Germans think our language is sing-songy. I was like, oh no, you need to see someone from India or Portugal because they're constantly moving. But that is cool because it makes it. My point, I guess, is that it makes it very easy for Americans or other international people that speak English to work with India because you don't have a lot of the communication issues that you have in other countries because of lack of language skill. Sometimes the oral, verbal communication is difficult because of accent, but written communication is always superb. I also wanted to note, and Neha had talked about how large India is, and I have one little picture here that shows parts of India. She is up here in Delhi. Is that that's correct, right? You're up here. Okay, so it's a really, really huge country. She talked a lot about north to south and all the different areas that there are in India. I think that also leads to a lot of the diversity that they have in everybody's favorite subject, which is food. So, Neha, tell me something, some of your favorite dishes. What are some Indian things that we absolutely must have? Because I think a lot of Americans think Indian and they say curry, and that's it. And I said, have you ever gone to the kitchen of a woman from India? There are at least 100 spices in there, and curry is not the thing. So tell me some of your favorite dishes.
That is so, so, so true. And I think this is one thing. So, two, three very interesting things, and I'm sure you will love to hear this. You know, from my grandmother's time, I mean, even before that, I would say ages beyond 100,000 years, there has been this very popular adage that the heart to a man goes through his stomach. So, and this is one this is one reason you will find all, I would say, when I say all, I am not generalizing, but largely speaking, Indian women are really fancy about cooking and they're very artistic the moment they get into their kitchen. And our kitchen is also our pharmacy actually, because we have whole bunch of spices. And as I say this, I'm having some mouth watering dishes already in my mouth because I'm really fond of. but but yes, so from the extreme north up of India, from Kashmir, where people are fond of, because it's very cold, so people are very fond of eating hot, spicy food, and the whole taste of food is very different. Unlike to the west of India, which forms larger part of the states of Gujarat and Rajasthan. So Gujarat is very rich in altogether different combinations of food, and they use a mix of sugar in every food, even in the breads that they cook, even in the pulses, the cereals that they cook, they'll put a pinch of sugar. In everything, they'll put a pinch of sugar. So whenever I am traveling to Gujarat, I will carry some of my stuff, some of my packet stuff, which is salty, because I can't have so much of sugar when I'm traveling to Gujarat.
Just carry salt with you just in case.
And and then you, like, from Delhi. So in Delhi, a very popular, like, morning, evening, night, anytime we can eat chola bhatura. So chola bhatura here is very, very popular, which is a bread which is deep fried, and there is chola which is yummy, and you gotta taste chola in different varieties, which is the heart of Delhi. So North Indians can have chola bhatura and rajma chawal, which is very popular at any time of the day. vis-a-vis South Indian, where you see altogether a different cuisine in forms of the batter that they make out of rice and pulses. So they ferment the batter, and out of that batter, they make dosas and idlis and upmas, which is not very spicy. It is very staple and basic food for them. So this is how there is so much of diversity in the food, and especially there is a huge discussion, huge. When I say huge, that means it's a discussion of multi-dimensional level, from older generations to younger generations, and from families, from rural to urban families of vegetarian and non-vegetarian. So a lot of bells and pockets you find vegetarian. People are hardcore vegetarian. When I say hardcore, means they will not even take onion and garlic. So there are communities which are who do not even take onion and garlic or milk.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. So, okay, educate me here. Why is onion and garlic not okay? Why is that not ve
It's not that
vegan?
it's not okay or not okay. It is just according to your taste palette. Like I don't have a palate
Oh,
for
okay.
garlic myself. So I mean,
Okay.
I'm not a garlic person. So it is just about taste palette. There
Okay.
could be some
Okay.
reasons for other people, but then everyone to themselves. But largely speaking, and then there are certain belts towards the coastal belts, and I tell you, trust me for that. People are crazy over seafood. They are so crazy. They want to have all the live fishes and the crabs and the prawns and whatnot. And I have my friend circle, when we go out for a wine and dine, and we are a mixed Ching Bang lot of 8, 10 people or 5 people. So everyone is ordering something different, and then we get to see the all new variety of the various cuisines. Okay, someone is ordering Thai, someone is ordering Italian, someone is ordering Lebanese, and someone is ordering typical some Indian food. And then in India, we now latest trends in this hospitality industry from last 3 4 years. I'm seeing that a lot of regional joints have come up. Like we have northeast specific food joints. We have any state specific. So India has 30 states. So we have any state
Okay.
specific food as well. So this is a huge, huge, huge subject. I mean, you can make like I would say 100 episodes. If anyone would want to start a TV program on that, then you can just start a TV program on Indian food, and there is so much to talk and discuss about it.
I mean, that
And
goes for almost everything in India. One of the comments I got repeatedly after I posted we were going to do this, one of the questions was like, how are you going to talk about just India? There's so many different diverse areas. I said, I know. Well, I got to start somewhere, right? So, but I
uh,
think that's true.
and
Diverse
very
in
and very
food.
interesting thing you mentioned about kitchen. Yeah, I mean, our kitchen is full of so many spices. There are so many boxes lying, like in my own refrigerator. If I could probably show you the video, or if ever you will get to see any Indian home's refrigerator, it is full of spices. We store a lot of our vegetable spices and nuts in the refrigerator because of the season. It's very hot summer right now, so to maintain it the whole year. So I call my kitchen a small pharmacy
I
because
heard you say that too. I love that. Yeah.
yeah, so because all these spices, there is a benefit associated to a lot of these spices, and there is something called, I mean, as you already know, that India is very popular for its yoga, meditation, spirituality, and naturopathy. So the naturopathy, vis-a-vis the allopathy, the naturopathy people, they really follow a lot of these spices and the benefits. They derive benefits from these spices, and you make different concoctions of water, you add different herbs, different spices to taste the same vegetable in different ways. So that's why I said women get very artistic the moment they enter into the kitchen. That's their favorite spot.
Yeah, I've talked about this with other cultures as well. I think that's one reason a lot of Americans turn their nose up. Now, it's getting more popular to be vegan or vegetarian, definitely. And my aunt, Mimi Kirk, is one of the most famous people to do it, so I can't deny that. But one of the reasons I think we turn our nose up to it is because our spice cabinet is, I've seen a lot of women that have 10 things in there. I mean, I don't know how you cook with 10 spices, but I've seen it. And no wonder our vegetables always taste the same because we don't do anything with it. I mean, as a vegetarian, you have hundreds of spices and you just said it perfectly. Different combinations make the same vegetable taste like something completely different. I think that's something else we could definitely take away from India is some different ways to cook. And it's far, far more than curry, people. So if you haven't been to a good Indian restaurant, there's no excuse. We have lots of good Indian restaurants in the United States. That's one thing we're blessed with is we have a lot of immigrants that come with very authentic cooking. So if you find a good one, there's no excuse not to go try some Indian food.
So it is Corona time. Otherwise, I could advise some of my clients or maybe myself to look for an investment and open a restaurant joint there and
Yeah.
maybe make some good food.
Exactly. And I think that is what most people are curious about is Corona time. And obviously this is not a pleasant subject. So usually I start the show by letting people know that we are talking about real culture with real people. So nothing is intended to offend or to upset or to be insensitive. It's coming straight from real people, their real experiences. They're not speaking for the whole country. Obviously, Neha's not speaking for 1.36 billion people, but they're speaking for their own experience. And I chose Neha because I've spoken with lots of people from India, and I felt like she really was able to tell the story as well as we need to hear it, because the news medias are not covering it in the way that I wish they were. So it's a little bit of shock value. I noticed there was nothing, and then there was this terrible story about all the bodies coming through the river, and then nothing. So I wanted to invite her here today to talk about it and I will show you just a little chart that we have here that we can see. That will show you a little bit about how devastating it's been, and it just really shows the numbers of how much things have changed for India over the time here. Here we go. We're going to share this screen right here, and you can see that this chart here starts out in like June of last year, and this is just April and May of this year. So the numbers have just gone up exponentially. It's been a really big struggle, and I'm going to hand this over to Neha to tell us what it's actually been like to be there and what they're doing to get through this, because one thing we did learn is that India is a very resilient culture and country. So Neha, tell me what it's like for you every day as you're struggling through this.
You know what, Angie, I really like how people perceive India as sometimes. I think every country has its own given inherent strengths and weaknesses, the country per se and the people as well. So there's no comparison when we talk about this country is this, the other country is that. I mean, we are all different countries and all different countries with with different people, different cultures, but same set of values, same set of philosophies to live life, same set of human values. Yeah, same set of
Yeah.
mindset. So I think that is what unites us globally. One. Secondly, as you rightly said, yes, we are more agile and we are more adaptive and we are more resilient. Why? Precisely because I think we are very used to staying together in this social circle. Like, so even when we are grown up in your 40s, in your 50s, still you are still staying with your parents, you're still staying with your younger ones. So there are 3 generations, 4 generations staying, and all different relationships within the same family. So we also get so strongly knit to each other that our happiness is multiplied within the family when we share. And as you rightly say that your sadness gets divided when you have your own people around you. So that, I think that's what makes us very, very strong. Like, I have my family with me and I stay with them, and the multiple people. So we all have different time to wake up, and we all have different things to do. All different generations, all have different likes, dislikes, and so a lot of things have to be managed within the family. But we are so used to it that there's no compromising, there's no complaining. We cannot be without that. So, and
Yeah.
then there is a lot of this sensitivity about the families of each other. Yeah, because their relationships. So everything is very relationship driven. Everything is very, very people driven here. That makes us very strong. That makes us immune. It doesn't permeate a lot of stress to us. If I'm stressed, I'll just pick up the phone, do few things. So it's like tuck tuck tuck. You can just do it away. So because the relationships make you so easy and simple. I think that's why we are happy to sail through. And I see Corona probably in a different way. I don't see India struggling with Corona, frankly. And that's totally my personal view. I don't think so. We are at all struggling with Corona. I think we are struggling with some other basic problems that the country overall has, and these problems have been with us over 100,000 years. Like for instance, population. For instance, education. Yeah. So now Corona has permeated into the rural areas. So you all get to see the global media. I mean, I watch all the global media here sitting in my room, and I see all the stories of cities, the urban areas being covered, Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, that is always in news, or the major cities, the major capitals. But
Right.
75-80% of India is rural India. We're talking
Right.
only about 10-15% of India, which is not true India. The true India is the remaining 75-80% of India, which is the rural India, which is agricultural India, where the health facilities, how people are living, the communities, what they are eating, their lifestyles, they don't have AC rooms, they don't have boardrooms, right? They
Right.
have open green grass fields, they are farmers, they are migrant workers. So I think they are the wheels of economy that we need to talk about. And that makes
Right.
Indian economy a robust economy. Yeah. So I see
Yeah.
Corona from a very different perspective. People are holding smartphones in their hand. A lot of these rural people, forget me, forget yourself, but a lot of these rural people, and they would have they would have had some basic education as well, but they don't know where can they go for a vaccination, for instance. Or even like US currency is 70 times more than my currency. Like my 1 rupee is your 70 rupees, more than that, 73. So it is 70 times,
Wow.
but people don't afford, I would say, a paid vaccination here in rural India. They can't afford to
Wow.
pay. So what I'm trying to say is, it is the challenges that we are talking for Corona. There are different challenges. I'll tell you a very interesting story. So we are a bunch of volunteers, a lot of women volunteers who are collected together, gathered together, and they're trying to help people in Corona. Now, can you imagine? There was some. So when you are helping as a volunteer, definitely you'll end up circulating your phone numbers, right? You'll end up
Mm-hmm.
circulating your phone numbers around, and there were people stalking you on looking at that you are a female, and if you are a good looking female, because all of you are in social media, so it is very simple to track. And anyway, you are posting either on some or the other social media platform, be it Facebook or Insta or LinkedIn, that hey, I'm a volunteer, I'm helping you with oxygen or concentrator or hospital beds or plasma or remdesivir, whatever medicines. So the moment you do that, and then people are threatening you, you please come. So look at the sensitivity. A woman who's trying to help as a volunteer in this trying times, and when she is being stalked, or when she is being threatened that you give medicine to me, or would you come for a date with me, and a lot of obscene messages. So the whole issue, then eventually that woman has to withdraw herself, that okay, I don't want to do this, because I can't take, because eventually I also have a lot of 100 things to manage and take care of, so it is a mental pressure on me as well. So, uh, that's why I say that I am not talking of Corona. The implications of Corona are manifold here. And they are varying from the urban population to the suburban population to the rural population, in terms of mental stress also, in terms of
Yeah.
mental well, mental stress, in terms of your education, in terms of your basic survival. Like in my home, everything is stocked up. When
Mm-hmm.
we rest, we are safe for next 3, 4, 5 months. We can take, I mean, more than that maybe, but I'm just saying, we can just take care of ourselves. But but the maids, the workers, the poor people, they don't have the rent to pay for the next month. They don't have the food to eat for the next day. They don't have
Right.
the next meal. So that, I think, that is a severe problem, you know Then
Yeah.
that, yeah. So
I think
Corona.
what it sounds like you're saying is that everything that Corona is doing there, what it's really doing is exacerbating problems you've already had. So the population issue, the lack of education, the way that women are sometimes treated, it's all being exacerbated by this extra stress and extra constraint put on the community. Which is, yeah, I mean, it absolutely makes sense. I think it happened to everyone. Just like you said, once again, we almost come back to population. It just happened more to you because there's more of you. There's more people there. Another question I had was you mentioned about the vaccination. So here in the United States, if you're 16 or over, and I may have this wrong, it might be everybody by now, but generally I know for sure 16 and over, you can get a vaccine for free almost the same day. I mean, the same day I did when I signed up a few weeks ago. My son just got it yesterday. He signed up yesterday. He got it yesterday. So it's free. It's everywhere. It's very easy for us to get. Would you say, and I noticed you said that you still have to pay in India. Is it an expensive thing? Is it open to everyone? What's the vaccine situation there?
So on the ground, the vaccine situation is one, we are deficit of vaccine right now. I myself, I've been trying for almost 2 weeks now to get myself registered on the website which we have, but I'm not getting any slot for the vaccine registration. My mom, she has had her first shot. I've been trying to get her second shot done for the vaccination, but we are not able to find any slot for her. And just today in the morning, it was in the news that one of the India made of vaccine is over. So we might close some centers. The vaccine is a mix of free and paid both. Even if it is paid, it is not very expensive because the
Okay.
paid thing is in the private hospitals. So it is hardly the price of a movie ticket that we have here, which anyone can afford. It is priced for a coffee or a movie ticket, frankly. So anyone can afford that. I'm not talking about again the rural population. A lot of people in rural areas, extreme rural areas, may not be able to afford that vaccine, but vaccine has not reached there as yet. Even
Right. Okay.
we are struggling for vaccine, and looking at the population, we don't see times really changing for us for next 3 4 years in this way, because when the vaccines will come and when the drives will go, and there are a lot of challenges with regard to the supply chain, the logistical issues. Actually, the whole supply chain mechanism has to be in place, which is a big business in itself. So that has to be tackled, and only then people can get vaccinated. A very good initiative, I must mention, because health is governed one by the central government, and second, health is a state subject. So we have 30 states. So every state has a state health department that takes care of the health and welfare of their own state people. So one of the chief ministers of our one state, he has opened the e government tender to invite a lot of foreign companies to directly give them vaccine for their state, for his own state, which is a very
Oh,
nice
wow.
initiative. Yeah, which is a
Yeah.
very nice positive initiative, because I can't smell anything political there. I can't smell anything bureaucratic there. And I
Yeah.
think this is a very nice initiative which must be, replicated by the state heads of other state heads as well, because eventually, being at a powerful position, being at a leadership position, I think your responsibility as a king is to take to take the responsibility of the welfare of your people. So
Yeah.
I really welcome this initiative by this man, and I just hope that maybe more people can walk his path. So that will be nice for us.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. And the other reason I asked that question is because I wanted other people to know in other countries, especially my own, because people are very hesitant about taking the vaccine just to see. And I'm not choosing either way. Everyone has their reasons to take it or not to take it, but for them to realize how lucky we are to have the choice. Many countries, we are way more fortunate than many countries to have the choice to take this vaccine for free if we want to take it. So I don't know, that's there's a lot of people against it, and I understand that, but it's interesting. The other reason I think is in the United States, we've been very fortunate and we haven't seen as many people we haven't lost as many people. And I will start with my condolences to you once again, and to Arvind and to Anarushe and a few other people I know that have lost people close to them. And these are not always old people. There are people that have passed away that are in their late 30s, early 40s, have been healthy. And I feel like there's a big myth in the United States that we don't need the vaccine. I already had it. You only need it if you're 70. It can't get to you. You're dealing with a third mutation, I think is what I'm reading in the news of coronavirus. And I just, you're dealing with a different thing than we are here. And I just want people to realize how fortunate we are to be able to have that vaccine and to not have that third mutation here yet, and have the same struggles. But seriously, too, I did want to give my condolences because I know many of you have lost people close to you, and neighbors and very close people, and that there are things happening there that we here in very cushy life of America would have a very hard time to understand, especially some of the cities. And I think we're going to leave that there because we certainly don't want to go any further into how sad. I don't want to make anyone cry here. So, but just thank you for sharing that and letting everyone else know that, we're all in different places on this. We're all fighting, as Neha said in the beginning, that the same enemy for the first time, coronavirus. We all are dealing with the same problem, but we are all people. We all want the same things for our friends, our family. It's all about being human and connecting and caring about each other. So let's say some extra prayers and send some extra thoughts and love to India right now. Now I would like to go back to something very fun. I always like to do a myth buster on these shows, right? So I'm going to ask you, which we already know because we can see her, but let's talk about what people wear in India. So do you dress like this? Is this something that you have in your closet?
Well, I don't have this, but yes, people do dress like this.
It's beautiful. I love it. And I do know I have several friends from India here that are just amazing. Aruna Ramamurthy. I should have invited her too. We'll do another one with her. But she's into dance, so I've seen a lot of her beautiful costumes. But I think that's really, really the different cultures you have there and traditions you have are so wonderful. And then the other picture we had was something that's very stereotyped here in the US, and that is the dot. Right?
The
So,
dot on the forehead.
yes, as you guys will notice, not every person from India has a dot on their head. So could I ask you to explain that for those who are not so comfortable with it?
Yeah, well, this dot in India, we call this bindi, Bindi, bindi. So bindi, basically, this is a tradition that married women wear. So when you are married, I mean, you can always have a bindi if you're not married, uh, and especially when you are designed in a traditional wear, which is a sari, what this lady was wearing. So in the traditional wear, when you're wearing a sari and you put a bindi, and so you look more beautiful. That is how. So you adorn your face with little bit of liner lipstick and a bindi on the forehead, which is in different colors. And by the way, just to tell you, you will be surprised, Angie. Bindi is a huge business in India. It
Really?
is,
You know, I
it
see a
is,
lot of the like actually I see much more than the red dot. I see these cute little like jewelry pieces and
yeah,
headbands
yeah.
that
And
drop there.
now you have Swarovski bindis, you have designer bindis, you have,
Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
you have long haul bindis, and bindi is, and again, as you move towards the different parts of India from north to south, the kind of bindis also change. The kind of, the mark that you see on the forehead, that also changed. Like in Maharashtra, they put a straight line like this instead of a round dot. They put a straight line like this.
Oh
So,
my gosh.
bindi is very very culturally oriented, and I think it is very inherent to the Indian tradition. It's a very staunch, I would say, Indian tradition to have a bindi.
Yeah, and I think that's so fun too because someone recently, and I won't tell you who, but it was a global writer, had the argument with me that it was religious. Like, no, it's only if you're Hindu. I said, look, I'm
No,
not Indian,
yeah,
but
I would ideally say a lot of Hindus put on bindis, and a lot of other religion people do not promote bindi. But more than religious, I think it is more of a tradition that you have. It is more culturally oriented, not religiously oriented.
yeah, I thought so too. But I thought it's worth asking. Now we know. And that's another question. I was going to, first of all, I want to say hi to Yen Lee. Yen Lee just said hi. Yen Lee's here. And I saw
Hello,
Aiden too
Yanli. Good to
earlier.
have you
And
here.
Monica. And I think Linda Wiles here. She's like my faithful supporter. She likes watching all these. So, hey, Linda. Hopefully, we didn't mess too many people up with technology, but just in case, we'll download it and we'll be able to share it too. So, you'll be able to see it just in case you missed it live. But I think one of the last questions I have for you is religion. So it's a very also culturally so, but also religious wise, very diverse. So you have Hinduism, Islam, some Christianity, Buddhism. Uh, how does that, do you feel like that here in the United States, certain religions will very much stand out to us if they're practicing their customs and traditions, mostly because of the traditional way that they dress? So that will really jump out to me as like, oh, wow, look, that person's not Christian or Catholic or whatever, or nothing. I think a lot of people are nothing, but agnostic. But how does that feel in India? Is it very normal for you to see all the different religions coming together? Are there ever any issues with different religions?
I think that's a very long, debatable questions, but I'll just try to keep myself as short as possible. Uh, well, I think again, it all goes back to your education. It all goes back to your parentage. Uh, if I talk about myself, I have seen reading all the religions. I've read Bible, I've read Quran, I've read Gita and Ramayana, which are the popular scriptures here in Hinduism. So I've grown up. I have friends cutting across all religions. We all eat in the same plate. We all drink water from the same glass. So, uh, I mean, I'm used to seeing all the people around. But yes, a lot of politics, a lot of vote, a lot of election campaigns. A lot of these things are driven by the religion, particularly here. I'm sure there must be in other countries also, which I read, whatever I follow globally. But definitely in India, I think uh, religion is a huge deterrent for people to come together sometimes, or for people to have different views or to have a lot of disagreements. So I just hope it is. I mean, I'm fine to have disagreements as far as you are not fighting with each other. So,
Yeah, I agree. You know, the only other
but
struggle
yes,
oh, go ahead.
and beyond the popular ones like Christianity, Hindu, Islam, we see a lot of other religions as well: Buddhism, Persian, Jainism. There are multiple other small communities which are very very fanatic, and they are very very strongly culturally binded in themselves. So I think religion plays a very important role here in India, particularly in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So yeah, Linda is still here. I knew she would be. She's so well world traveled. She's more well traveled than any American I think I know. So she's always interesting to get her take on this stuff. So thank you. Thank you, Linda, for watching us today. Oh, and Lisa Deaton's here too. Hi, Lisa. Good to see you as well. Yeah, I think that's really what you said, as long as they're not arguing, as long as they're not fighting. The only other thing that I have seen starting to work globally, and it's not a problem at all, it's not an issue, but it can be a challenge, are so many holidays. Because there's so many different national holidays for so many different countries, and then there's so many religious celebrations, and you're working with so many different religions. I'll just randomly say, like tomorrow is admittedly already forgot, but some type of holiday in Malaysia for some reason. And I'm like, it's
Yeah.
May 3rd, it's a Wednesday. What? So it's a Thursday. Why are we doing this on Thursday or today? I think. So it's just interesting with religions to actually logistically make calendars and create events to make sure that you've not got somebody's holiday, somebody's religious celebration, and to try to be culturally aware of everything. It's really a challenge. So I thought, wow, and that's all happening in India. So you have lots of religion.
Yeah, we have a very big holiday tomorrow, which is an Islamic festival called Eid ul-Fitr, if I'm right. And we are celebrating that. And there's a huge rush in the markets. This is a very, very big thing for Islam as a religion. It is one of the very big events of the year. So, yes, I think I would agree. We enjoy multiple holidays in between weeks, beyond Saturday, Sundays, and all around the year. Especially our holiday season starts from August onwards, and August to March, uh, those 7 months, they are full of holidays, and you have no idea. Every Indian is so happy, especially all those, the corporate MNC crowd, which is working in like big companies, and they
Yeah.
are so happy to enjoy and get this holiday. You will just see them pushing themselves into the cars with the family and just going out for a weekend drive. They will go to the hills, they will go take a flight, go to the sea. Yes, Corona has changed, so it's not that spontaneous anymore. But otherwise, people will not stay in your city at all. One holiday and they're all out for a weekend freak out. So holidays
Oh,
are
I
welcome.
love that. I think we definitely have more holidays here in the United States. That's for sure. I feel like everyone else is always on holiday except us. We've got like 10. I'm like, what the heck? We need more of these things. But I would also say to all the people that may be watching from Neha's side, from India, don't be upset with us Americans if we try to schedule a meeting on your holiday. We have 10. We're just not used to all of yours. So it was not meant to be offensive. We just didn't know it was there. That's usually the case. I did have one other question someone asked me, and that was about, well, actually, I had two. One was extremely ridiculous, but hey, we got to answer all of them. Have you ever seen a tiger? Was the question, because apparently they think tigers walk
I
around
have
the
seen
street.
I have seen the tiger in a zoo. Yeah.
Okay. So, but he's not sitting outside your apartment. He's in a zoo.
No, not at all. And
Okay.
then I have seen the live tiger. I have seen in a zoo from little distance of, I would say, 10 meters or so. And yeah, but otherwise we see a lot of these tigers. The images, the monuments where where you have the palaces and you see the images of tigers hanging on the walls and all those things. So there are certain places here in India where you see the rhinoceros, the tigers, and they're all hanging on the walls as showpieces. So
That's cool. That's so cool. And then the last question I had was about the Taj Mahal. So that was something I think when people think of India, apparently they think of the Taj Mahal and tigers. So I'm so glad we did this. Now they'll know there's so
and
much more to India.
you will be surprised to know, Angie, I've never seen Taj Mahal.
That doesn't surprise me because I don't think I know. I know one person, one of my friends from India has seen it, but I would say the other like 50 have said the same as you. So
Because for us Taj Mahal is, for us, yeah, we know, like, I have grown up in an American school. I have a lot of expats and Americans as my friends here, and they're all crazy about Taj Mahal. And anyone who comes from any overseas country, they're so fond of Taj Mahal. I think it is just overhyped, and there are a lot of other beautiful places that people must visit to actually see the culture of India. Uh, though yes, we are proud of having a Taj Mahal, but then Taj Mahal is just not it. It has just been overhyped for last 100 years, I would say rather. Uh,
Yeah,
and That's about it. It is just another monument. But
right.
the good thing is that yes, for us it is pride because it has taken place in the top 8 wonders of the world. But there are a lot of beautiful other things. You gotta see a lot of interesting things about India other than Taj Mahal. So anytime anyone is coming to India, please connect with me, connect with Angie, and say that hey, I want to connect with Neha. I'll change my profession for a while. I'll become a tourist guide and set your itineraries and help you take around India.
Yes, there
I
you
don't
go,
mind.
guys. You heard it. If you stayed till the end, you want a prize because Neha's going to be your travel agent. I think the very last question I like to ask is just what this show is really about. So, in India is so full of industry and opportunity and the economics compared to other countries. It can be truly a gold mine of getting things started with global companies. So, what advice would you give to international companies and other global professionals that are trying to work with India? What cultural advice would you give them that we need to know about working with people from India?
I think my first suggestion to any foreign company, whether US or Europe or Japan or from anywhere, the first suggestion is have a trusted have a trusted person from India on your side. That is very, very important because uh, the whole the whole gamut of modus operandi and things, how people work in India. For instance, how companies work, how people work, how departments work, from larger corporations to the government offices. Yeah, the whole culture is so different. The whole mindset of working with people is so different that if you do not want yourself to be led into any frustration or thinking that hey, I've made a wrong decision, because you've actually not made a wrong decision to work in India or with Indians, but it's just about that having that cultural sensitivity and having that balance with the disparity. It is good to have some Indian company, and or especially having one advisor consultant on your side who can actually be with you and help you run through whatever partners that you align with, whether it is JVs or their conversations, so that they can help you decode, okay, with what mindset, what person is writing what. That's very, very important, I would say. Indians are very good to work with, especially in these times and before that also. The online businesses have been doing very, very well. I am a mentor on the board of NASCOM, which is an industry body, and we have Deep Tech Club. I'm also a mentor with the US Embassy here in India. And when I'm mentoring startups, I see a lot of disrupting startups in the technology space, and they are solving a lot of global problems of enterprises, B2B problems as well. So I think they are doing phenomenally well, and they are attracting good round of investments as well. Uh, but as I said, a good idea is to have an Indian on your side.
And I think that is also great advice because we often underestimate the amount of culture in India. One thing I have been asked more than once is, can you teach a culture class on India? And I said, where would you like me to start? I mean, which part of India, which city, what are you doing? I mean, there's so many questions to that. So I would say that that's some of the best advice you could give, is because the answer to that is no. I'm a certified culture coach and I would not give a culture class on India. I would ask other people to do some type of panel for me, where I would bring in people from different regions to do a panel, to ask questions, to talk about their regions. But even as someone who has passed the certified culture coach testing internationally, I would not do that, because there's just too big, there's too many pieces. Neha is an excellent resource also for your marketing. Even if you're a marketing company, if you want to start marketing to India or in that area, she's going to be able to help you brand your product so that you're speaking the right language to the right people. So she's someone to do that, as well as a master connector. So if you are interested in working with India or exporting into or out of, whichever, Neha is a great resource. I have her LinkedIn right there on the bottom, so you can contact her there, and also follow Mensen Talk from there. And as a parting thing, Neha, did you have anything that I may have missed or that you'd like to add?
No, thank you, Angie. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I think yes, India is so rich in so many ways, and we are very thankful to a lot of other countries who have been extending great help to us during these times. And a lot of these helps, though, are extended from country to country, basis the intercultural relationships that the respective presidents and prime ministers have maintained between two countries, the bilateral relations. However, I think a human to human approach, which I really believe in, it works very well. So anyone who is wanting to help in any way or extend any support, definitely your wishes and prayers are very important. But I think this human to human connect in terms of support also, just identify, find any good trusted person you know out there, and send in your proceedings to them. And I think the person should be able to do a justice in terms of helping the near and dear ones or the people who really need help. So that is, I will close on this note. And thank you. It's been a lovely discussion. And I love India. I love being Indian. And I think I'm just so Indian at heart. Uh, but the interesting thing is that we are blessed because we are educated, we got good parentage, and we have seen all the corporate culture and the global companies that we have been working with. So it gives us a lot of sensitivity globally and to help us make the global network and connections. Thank you so much for having me here. Any which way I can help you, please feel free to reach out to Angie or me, and we are here. Thank you.
Thank you, Neha. It was wonderful to have you. And I know there were some difficult subjects to talk about. And I think you did a wonderful job of bringing out the beauty of the country and the food and the culture, and how easy you are to work with, in addition to letting the rest of the world, and us letting the rest of the world, know how fortunate we are in some ways, and all coming together. So thank you again for being here. Really excited to have everybody join me. And I hope that you will join me again next week at 8 a.m. same time, because we are going to Malaysia, and that will be a fun one. I don't know how it's going to work. We're going to have about 10 people on, so I normally have 1 or 2, so it should be interesting. But we're having a great time in Malaysia next week, Wednesday at 8 o'clock. Thank you, Neha. Have a great day.
Thank you. Namaskar, everyone. Bye-bye. And you all have a
Bye.
great weekend ahead. Bye-bye. Thanks. Thanks, Angie.
Thanks.